Well, welcome everyone to the Westview podcast. So glad that you are tuning in. I am joined by Cheryl Johnson and Charlie Salamoni, both pastors here at Westview. Thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure.
You're welcome.
This is number 2 of our Conversations edition of the podcast. And this is fun. Before we jump into our topic for today, just want to ask you a few questions. Don't take too long to think about them. This is just for fun. Cake or pie?
Pie.
This isn't fun.
That wasn't one of the options.
150% pie.
Pie.
Pie?
Nice.
Okay. Pancake or waffle?
Waffle.
Waffle.
All right, very certain of that one. Train or plane?
Plain.
Plain.
You're both wrong, but anyway.
It takes forever to get somewhere if you're going far.
Yeah, but it's so much nicer.
I
Like you
can't
have
take
more
a train to Japan.
space. You can like write on the train.
I can't take a train to Japan.
Yeah, that's true. But like you can just enjoy the scenery when you're on a plane. I guess you can look outside when you're on a plane, but you can't. It's not the same. Like a train is just like smooth, so you can actually get work done and you can really enjoy the scenery.
You can work on a plane.
Yeah, I guess you can. It's so squishy though. You know?
But you can go farther faster. That's what I like.
Yeah.
I've never rode on a train.
Never?
No, except for a really small Thomas replica at the Children's Train Museum in Wisconsin.
How was that?
It was amazing.
Would you prefer to ride that or a plane?
If Thomas could go faster, I would just ride Thomas all the time.
Okay. So I feel like when you try a real train, it will go faster. So I feel like your decision's probably going to end up being train. Just saying.
Depends on where you want to go, I guess.
Yeah, fair.
I want the speed of a jet, so.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right, last question.
I want to take a train through the ocean.
Could happen.
Yeah,
could,
maybe.
In future.
Submarine train.
There you go. If Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk want to make it happen, maybe they'll do it.
Do it.
Who knows?
I'm sure they're listening, so.
Yeah. Get on it, guys.
Challenge accepted.
All right, last question. Winter or summer?
Is that a trick question?
Winter.
What?
I got to go with winter too, I think.
I like the cold.
What?
Well, fall isn't an option, but
leaving.
fall or spring are like ideal. But the problem that I have with summer is that like in the winter you can always put on another layer.
Yep.
Or you can put a log in the fire or whatever.
What
like you
in
can
the
turn up the
world?
heat. You can't take off your skin. Like at a certain point in the summer, it's just too hot.
What the heck? It's
We
like
hang out
gets
too
dark
much,
at
Ryan.
like
Yeah.
it gets dark at like 4 o'clock and it's cold. You go outside and what?
Can I
You
look?
can be cozy in the winter.
Yeah.
You
Let me
summer's
adjust
like,
my
meh.
answer a little bit. Like winter, but like pre-Christmas. Like leading up to Christmas, you got the lights outside. Like it's just wonderful. I get that in January, it's kind of like.
The first time it snows, it's really nice, and then I want it to be warm and sunny again.
Okay. So a very short winter.
I put up like thousands of Christmas lights in my house when it's like once the time change happens, which by the way is this weekend. And it's just nice in my house, like cozy, warm light.
Right.
Yeah, by the time
Makes me
people
happy.
watch this, though, the time change is going to be last weekend.
Just about to
Oh,
say
sure.
that.
It's last weekend.
Should make
So
Sorry.
if you're listening to this now, don't change your clock again. You'll be 2
You've
hours
been
off.
late for everything.
Yeah. Wait, is this the good one or the
Yeah,
bad
it's the
one?
good
This is
one.
the good
This is
one.
the good one where we get an extra
Yay,
hour of
extra
sleep. You either get an extra hour of sleep or you're unwise like I am sometimes. It's like, I can stay up an extra hour.
Yeah. I did not take advantage of this opportunity.
Defeats the purpose. That's fine. All right. Good. This was good.
Yep.
We'll jump right into our topic for today, which is not controversial at all.
Perfect.
This isn't something that Christians
don't
like to
do
argue about. It's
controversy.
something that we just ubiquitously agree on. We're going to talk about Halloween.
Oh. Can we also talk about the fact that I can't say the word controversy, apparently?
What did you say?
I said controversy.
Controversy. I mean, Shakespeare made up words.
Sure,
Why
okay.
can't you? Right?
Don't
okay.
judge me.
So, why don't we start by asking this question, okay? As charitably as possible, no matter where you fall on this, what are the reasons to celebrate Halloween and what are the reasons to not? Like, people who fall in either camp, what's a good representation of both views?
A representation of what they would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like maybe like the best
Sure.
argument. Maybe we can start with what's a good argument to celebrate Halloween.
I don't know if I would say an argument to do it in the sense of like if you don't want to, there's no like
Right.
you're free to not do it if you don't want to.
Or maybe like, why do people feel it's okay? Do we want to start maybe why people wouldn't choose to celebrate Halloween?
Okay, I feel like this is something that is so simple and so easy to get an answer from the Bible, to be honest. It's something that I feel like the conversation, obviously Halloween is not brought up in the Bible, but something else is brought up that so perfectly relates to this. From my perspective, it's really easy to see a biblical way to navigate this. The argument usually goes is, do you know the origins of Halloween? Like, you're a Christian, and like Christians are supposed to be against witchcraft. True. Christians are supposed to be against like pagan idolatry. Very true. And those are the roots. And not only are those the roots of Halloween, but look around, that's often the things that people are celebrating on Halloween, which there are some people that certainly are doing more than just putting on costumes and getting candy. Who knows what sort of dark stuff happens on Halloween. They would say Christians are supposed to be of the light. We're not supposed to be of the dark. We should have nothing to do with something that comes from evil roots and also is currently celebrated in an evil way. We should be, what is it? Yeah, we're children of the light. That's pretty much the argument of stay away from Halloween. I think there is more to it than that if you want to look at it from a biblical standpoint. And I'm just going right in, giving my perspective.
Yeah,
so,
do it.
Here's the deal. Yep, I don't know about the history of Halloween, but actually, to be honest, the way that I see it biblically, it doesn't matter what the history is. It doesn't matter what the roots are. Because the way that I celebrate Halloween is candy, fun, silly costumes. This year, Josh was Captain America and Tovia was a poodle. You know,
What were you?
fun. I was just a dad.
Just checking.
And meeting your neighbors, knocking on door, getting candy, and seeing other costumes. Some of which were dark and scary. I'm not gonna lie, which didn't bother me, but little Tovia was crying at 1 or 2 points in our stroll. But so no one's gonna say that candy. Well, few people are gonna say candy is sinful. If you think candy is sinful,
Maybe dentist advantage.
Yeah, dentist
yeah.
advantage.
Not all things are beneficial, but that's another conversation. But basically, so if you're celebrating Halloween and you're actually drawing pentagrams and worshiping dark things, that's bad. Okay. If you are celebrating Halloween by meeting your neighbors, giving candy to kids, accepting candy, doing fun costumes, having a costume party, well, there's nothing sinful about costumes and candy. And then someone says, yeah, but what about all the dark stuff and what about the roots, the history of Halloween? I'm so glad you asked, because that so perfectly lines up with the conversation in, I believe it's the book of Romans. You can look it up and read the specifics. The conversation is about food sacrificed to idols. And the Bible is so amazing because it takes these things that were going on at the time, and we could say the Bible was not written to us, but it was written for us. We have something that seems so different, like, okay, I've never had to deal with whether or not to eat food sacrificed to idols, but the way that issue translates. So what was going on at the time is a lot of the meat that you would buy in the market, depending on where you were, sometimes maybe like all the meat you would buy in the market was meat that were from animals that were killed during pagan idolatrous worship. And so, okay, this lamb was killed while worshiping this false god. So would a Christian eat it? How could a Christian eat that? That was the question. Should a Christian eat it? And the Apostle Paul, he says a number of things. And he says, and by the way, if you don't like what I'm saying, you don't agree with what I'm saying, just keep listening, please, because we'll talk about that also. But the Apostle Paul says first he says, everything is the Lord's, and an idol isn't anything. So the sheep that was sacrificed to so-and-so, it's a sheep made by God. There is no idol that owns that sheep. Okay? Everything is the Lord's. Everything was created by God. And so he says, basically, you can do all things to the glory of God. So basically, the reason it fits perfect is, yes, the history of this piece of meat on your plate did go through some dark stuff. But for you in your heart, if you're just eating a steak and you're not celebrating the devil or the false god, enjoy the steak to the glory of God. And in the same way, like if I am actually doing the dark stuff of Halloween, then yes, that's bad.
Yeah.
But the fact that it has dark roots and a dark history doesn't affect me in my walk with the Lord if I want to bring my kids, meet my neighbors, put on silly costumes, and get candy. You can do that to the glory of God. So whether you eat or drink, do all things to the glory of God, meaning Christian morality is much more about why you do something than like some sort of historic roots of the thing. Now, there's more to the conversation with meat sacrificed to idols. Sorry, Cheryl, I'm just talking and you're not getting a chance at all.
I'm just agreeing with you.
So there's more to the conversation actually because some people, when it comes to like meat sacrificed to idols, what it says is like some people's, because of past associations, that's how it's worded in the scriptures. And I wish I had the actual verse, but that you just Google it, you can read it yourself. Because of some people, because of past associations, basically they can't just eat the food with a clean conscience. Basically, people who they used to be part of that dark idolatry. So sure, you can sit down and eat it like it's just a piece of meat, but for me to sit down and eat it, all I can think about is the dark stuff that went on in that dark temple of Baal. Mm-hmm. And for me, I just can't do it. And it's like, okay, that's actually fine. That's totally fine. The Bible would call that, in the context, it says that would be the weaker brother. And that's not a bash, but it's basically to say, yeah, your faith doesn't allow you to eat it, even though it is in itself, it's not unclean. In itself, it's not sinful, but your faith doesn't allow you to, and don't do it. If it messes with your conscience, don't do it. Here's where there's a little more to the conversation, and this is why it's even more important that we don't fight over this sort of thing. Because there are going to be people in the church who, sometimes you talk to someone who has come from like a non-Western culture where people really did worship these really dark things it does happen here too, but it's less common here. But in some people, they come from cultures where this sort of dark, like voodoo and things like that are so real. So to see someone walking around in a costume that's like I was talking to Yao, a year or so ago, and he said, they have like someone dressed up as a mermaid. Where I come from, that's the god of the sea, and you don't want to mess with her, And it's like, well, for us, it's just a silly costume, And basically, so we need to respect that people have different past associations and not flaunt it. Like, I just told you guys now that my kids celebrated Halloween, but I didn't put it on Facebook because I really don't want to hurt someone who really has some of these past associations, or it's hard for them to get over the fact that there is dark stuff associated. Mm-hmm. So in conclusion, Halloween, when I say Halloween, what I mean is the candy and the costumes and the meeting your neighbors and stuff, that is not unclean in itself. That is not sinful in itself. There is a dark history with Halloween, I suppose, and there are certainly dark things that go on with Halloween. That stuff you should certainly avoid. But whether or not you choose to celebrate Halloween and whether or not it's sinful is really about what's going on in your heart. Why are you doing it? But as you're doing it, be sensitive to other people, because the way that's worded in Scripture is don't let your freedom cause someone else to stumble. Meaning, don't let your freedom to celebrate Halloween hurt someone who's grieved by it. Now, there's just one more thing I want to add, and I just keep talking. So one more thing I want to add. We're missionaries. And missionaries always have to choose how much are we going to engage with the culture, and in doing so, how much might we offend people who are not really part of that culture. There was a question brought up, and without getting into it, basically, we have a drum set back here. And there are some Christians that are really offended by drums in churches. Mm-hmm. But we have chosen to do it anyways as a way to engage with the culture. And sadly, it's like we realize there probably are a small percentage of people that are offended by that, but that's just something that we as a church have decided to do. And if you're not for that, you can find churches that don't have drums.
Well, it's also biblical too, right? Like there's clanging of cymbals, and I think
people who are more. I've heard the argument said like, well, drums are never mentioned. Okay, well, but anyways,
cymbals from now.
But the point I'm trying to make is, we actually did have the youth group had a costume party, and it's probably going to
costume contest.
Costume contest.
Who won?
But this is what I'm trying to say.
Categories.
Okay.
This is trying to say we're in a culture where no one thinks Halloween is sinful, who are outside the church for the most part, and for the vast majority of them, they're not doing idolatrous worship. They're just doing candy and costumes.
Yeah.
Okay. If we lived in a place where Halloween was largely dark worship, then I'd be a lot more cautious about how we Christians are going to get involved in that. But I grew up in a non-Christian family. Never once, I did Halloween. I was excited about it every year. Never once did I actually think, let's do some magic or let's conjure up spirits. It was just the costumes and the candy. And I can tell you, in a secular culture such as this, that's the vast majority of people, and that's a place that we can engage with. That's a place we can meet them, and sure, let's hang out together. You're going to come to my door, I'll come to your door, meet some neighbors for the first time. So I would say, as missionaries, as a whole, I think that's something that we can do, realizing we might offend people, and I don't want to offend people for no reason, but for the sake of mission, sometimes we have to be willing to offend people to a degree. So... I'm going to stop talking now.
Mic drop.
So, yeah.
Podcast over. No, I'm just kidding.
What are your thoughts, Cheryl?
Well, I grew up not celebrating Halloween. I think partly because my parents had this, like the origins of Halloween. But also, I was just telling you guys before we started recording that, like, I was a very timid child. I know that's hard to believe looking at me now, but I was afraid of everything in a uniform or a costume. And so, like, it was not a good scene for me to be going around with all these, like, scary costumes around, and I would just freak out constantly, and my parents were like, it's not worth it. But we didn't, so we didn't do the, like, traditional celebration of Halloween, but my parents made sure that night was special for us because they knew we were missing out. And so, like, I grew up in the townships when I was a small child, and that was back then the Canadians farm team was in Sherbrooke, and so I grew up watching Patrick Roy like before he was on the Canadians, and so we would go to those games. They would rent like a big screen and a projector, and we would watch movies. Everyone gave us their leftover candy so we didn't miss out on the candy game, and so like we were still kind of celebrating, just doing something different. And so I think like the term celebration is a little bit misleading because we're not like like Satan worship and stuff, like we're just doing something. And I think the part about being a missionary, Charlie, that you said was like, that's what my heart is now. That's where my heart goes to. And even I was thinking about it on Halloween this week. I was like, are we missing out on an opportunity at Westview? Because we typically don't do anything because it is such a polarizing topic. But are there, like we really want to be out in our community and loving people, and are we missing an opportunity to do that by not doing anything for Halloween? And I'm not saying do like the giant, like whatever, but like if we just had my old church in Vancouver did a little pit stop. They had hot chocolate and a little putting green and some candy, and it was just a way to like love their neighbors. And I don't even know if we have trick-or-treaters around here, because Ryan and I were just talking about how we have a lot of apartment buildings and condos. So it's like no one comes to my apartment, and that's fine with me. But I just wonder if we're missing opportunities. And it's a good way to love your neighbor on that night.
I did hear like I remember at some point I was at something where there was a bunch of cars, and it was like each car was like a station.
Yeah, trunk or treat.
Yeah, people could like go trick or treat because it's like, and you could hit up like 25 spots in one little, and that
Yeah.
like we're gonna talk about this next year. We're gonna do something.
Well, and like one time when I was a teenager, I was part of something called Can or Treat. So we asked for like non-perishable food so we could donate it to a food bank. So that's another thing we could do. Like, or we can just like empower you who are listening and who are in our church to do something in your neighborhoods. You don't have to come to Westview. You can do it in your driveways or whatever.
Yeah. I think too, when you're looking at, older pagan practices from, way back when that have continued in the culture and maybe have started to become divorced from their original spiritual. I mean, not completely, as you said, Charlie. There are some people who are still doing some pretty dark stuff on Halloween, but I think that as Christians, for us to redeem some of those practices, I think it's about discerning what was the initial intent and how do we turn from ungodliness while still being able to engage with our community and engaging in some of those good things, because the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, right? Like you were talking about the food offered to idols. It's like, is there anything wrong about costumes and candy? And this is just my perspective, but I think that there is something ungodly about celebrating death and fear, but we don't have to celebrate death and fear. We can choose to have costumes that don't celebrate that, right? And that celebrate something else. So again, it's a matter of conviction. There might be some Christians who would even disagree with me there, but that's just another thought too. For someone who's on the fence, I think that you can actually decide, I'm not going to celebrate that element, but we're going to do the costume and candy thing. And it's going to be redeeming this practice. 1 year, we put a heart in our pumpkin, which I think my dad thought was cheesy, but my mom loved it, and it was good.
It's a good point that, like, on one hand, you might have people that are like way out there, literally conjuring spirits or trying to and worshiping false gods, but then the idea of just taking the more subtle way of like honoring things that maybe shouldn't be honored, like you said, like. How'd you say, like, something death?
Death and fear. And even things like witchcraft, we're starting to see in our culture that being normalized in a way. Yeah. We're seeing it depicted in media as not a big deal. So, like, I'm also sensitive to the fact that it's like we don't want people to think that those things aren't a big deal. So it's like, as a Christian, you probably don't want to be, and again, I'm not saying this to put judgment or pressure on people. This is about convictions, but I would understand how someone would feel that I don't want to put a thumbs up to any of that stuff. I don't want to honor any of that stuff. But the good news is that we don't have to. You can go trick-or-treating as Bob the Builder,
Yeah, it kind of feels to me like that's the same mentality that's like, well, I don't watch TV because some of the shows are, where it's like, well, some of the shows are great, you're missing out. And it's like, but it is true, when you turn on the TV, there's a lot of shows that might not be helpful and might not be healthy, especially for children. And it's totally true. When we went trick-or-treating, there were some houses we did not go to, and that's because my little Tovia saw the decorations and she was afraid. And it was like, well, just skip that one, and then we went to one door and someone opened the door with a very creepy costume and just really made her cry, and he apologized. And I get it. Someone who would say, you know what, I'd rather just do something else. And it actually begs the question, like, maybe we should have some sort of event going on here where people could celebrate the fun elements of Halloween without having to worry that you're going to knock on someone's door and like someone looking like a demon is going to answer and scare your 4-year-old. So
I have a pastor friend in Texas, and he dressed up as Martin Luther with his hammer. I loved it.
This is the tension that we all have to walk in our Christian lives, which is, how do we be in the world but not of it?
Yeah.
Right? And if you go to either one extreme, you're missing something, right? We can't go and retreat completely, but we also can't just embrace everything. We have to be in this world but have a distinctiveness to us. So how can we engage in something like Halloween while being lights and have a distinctiveness about us within that?
But
know?
I think, yeah, like like what you were saying, Charlie, like decide for yourself. You know, we had a question come into the text line about like my husband and I are like talking about it, and he thinks this and I think this, and like it's okay to like, you know, talk it through and decide yes or no. Because there's no judgment either way, you know, like, and we're not saying the occult doesn't exist. Like it's real and it's out there. And like you said, it's getting more sneaky in how it's like presented. And so, the way that we thought about it maybe 10 years ago it's much different now. So you still need to guard your heart and teach your children and disciple your children and disciple yourselves, to guard against that. But I don't think that Halloween in the way that we practice it now is a harmful thing in and of itself.
The way that we practice it,
Yeah,
the way that
like
many people practice
getting
it.
candy.
Yeah, exactly. As long as we clarify that, because you're right, there are plenty of people that they're not worshiping the devil, but they're doing things that are definitely celebrating things like death, that are very serious things that that should be death should be considered without. Death should be considered with the gravity of what it is, and the fact that we need salvation, not just something we just like, death, you know.
We're people of resurrection life.
Yeah.
You know, I think really important just to remember as we're discerning in this, as you said, Charlie, you know, if you don't, I think it's Romans 12, right? Romans 12, if you don't follow your convictions, you're sinning. There's just that idea of like, pray about it, discern, you know, spend some time in it, and follow your convictions, but have grace for others and for them to come to their own conclusions as well. I remember years ago, there was this guy on Facebook, and he shared this like post, and he said something like, it was just out of the blue. He was basically like, oh, it's Halloween again. The Pharisees are going to come out. You know, the Pharisees are going to come out like criticizing, and Halloween is okay, you know. And I actually commented, I'm like, I actually agree with you that you can celebrate Halloween in a way that's okay, but what you're doing is not right, because like you're just like it was just like he was throwing stones and picking a fight. And like understand, and this goes for a lot of things, like the unity in the church is more important than being right on so many different issues. There are some issues that you have to fight for, but there's a lot of things that unity is a more important value, and keep that in mind. Well, and can I just say too that, you know, like we need to be able to have these conversations in love and grace. Hopefully they never get heated, but even if they're going to, I really feel strongly about this. A lot of the times people are having these arguments online, and we're not realizing that this is a bad witness to unbelievers. You know what I mean? Who are going to see that, and we're just spoon feeding them their own biases, that the church is just divided and arguing all the time, because the non-believer is going to look for that. They're not always going to be charitable and be like, oh, well, you know, this is just one instance, and these people are actually friends in real life. Like, you're only giving them a snapshot. So it's like, let's be more discerning about what we're posting online, and maybe something can be a private message instead of a big post, you know, that... Anyway. Well,
yeah, and kind of check your heart. I know that's like a funny thing that we say, but check your heart for like why are you debating this? You know, like, are you just trying to prove yourself right and get more followers on your side or whatever? You know, like.
Well, and all of us do it, right?
Or do you care for the person and love them and want to, you know, see the best for them? Yeah. Which goes for any kind of debate online.
For sure.
Or in person.
Well, we've all made posts or said things that were like, oh, I shouldn't have said it that way. Or, and at that point, it's like you even mentioned this on Sunday, like if you're being a jerk, apologize, you know, like, and that'll be a good witness in that sense. But it's a good word. Yep. Okay, I'm going to be the liturgical fanboy here and at least mention that part of the origins, I mean, some of the stuff that we're talking about, Halloween has some of those pagan roots that have, you know, that we've talked about have changed with time. And but in the church calendar, All Hallows Eve and this time in general is actually to remember all of the saints. And the church traditionally has sought to remember the saints and be inspired by their faith. You know, there's that passage of, since we're surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, of the faith, essentially. Like that's supposed to inspire us. And they got to the point where there's so many saints, you could be celebrating every single day and have more left over. So like, okay, we're just going to have a day to celebrate all the saints. And the cool thing is it's those notable saints, but it's also the saints in your family, to just remember people of faith. So I also would want to encourage people while they're participating in Halloween to maybe also take a moment to embrace some of the historical church calendar around this time and take some time to remember Martin Luther, or St. Athanasius, or your grandpa, or your grandma and their faith and how the Lord was with them in their life. So do that too.
Yes, do it.
Any other thoughts on Halloween? All right.
Candy on sale is good.
Yeah. Should we talk about what candy to get and what
Post.
candy to not get? Hey, here's something I noticed. A lot of people in Canada give bags of chips for candy.
Yep.
Is that not done in America?
No, not really.
I'm so
Very
sorry.
rarely. So we like things sweeter in the U.S. I've noticed that. So we're bigger fans of corn syrup.
Okay.
So
I've also seen a lot of people being like, "Oh, I gave full-size candy bars," and I'm like, "Is that what the world is coming to?" Like, there's going to be an expectation now of like, "Oh, you didn't give a full-size candy bar.
Yeah.
You're a terrible person." That's going to be the next Halloween debate. The next big
Yeah.
Halloween debate.
Yeah. If you're a believer practicing like celebrating Halloween, don't brag about your full-size chocolate bars either.
yeah, if you
Makes
give
us feel
Tootsie
bad.
Rolls, that's a bad witness.
There you go. And with that, I think we can close our conversation. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. If you're watching on Facebook, you could just like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on the Apple Podcast app, please give us a 5-star review and 5-star rating. Made the same mistake last week. And just write a little review. And if you're listening on Spotify, if you could follow us and hit the notification bell, that would be awesome. You won't miss an episode. Thanks so much, everyone. See you next time.